Okay, so we're starting the learning some of these Gemarot. It's from Gemora Gittin, page Chaf Hey Amud Nun Hey Amud Bet, page 55b, 110, from just over halfway down the page. And what I'm using over here is the text from safaria.org. I did put the link earlier on, but otherwise you can just take a look for it. And you'll see it over here. As I said, it's Gittin 55b, and it's got it in Hebrew and in English. And let's get stuck straight into these Gemarot. What you see in the Gemora over here is really dealing with the issue of what happened in the temple, the destruction not just of the temple but of Jerusalem, of all of Jewish life, and the Jewish people being settled in Jerusalem. And throughout the land of Israel, and really the very tragic way in which that ended, in which that came to a close. And we'll see as we go through, especially with the explanation of the Maharal, that it's not just something that sort of happened randomly, but the way that we understand it is that it has this very clear structure that our sages gave to it in explaining what happened and why. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, "My dichtiv." What does the verse mean when it says, "Ashrei Adam mefached tamid"? Praiseworthy is a person who is always afraid. Umak shelibo yipol bara'ah, and one who hardens his heart will fall into evil. So it starts with something that's maybe a little counterintuitive, because normally we say that to live in fear is not a good thing. And in fact, right on this point, the Tosfot and the Maharal of Prague ask, what do we mean that it's a good thing to be in fear and to harden our hearts? We have another pasuk, another verse which says, "Pachadu b'tzion chatayim." It was sinners who lived in fear. And the Gemora, in another place dealing with this, explains that indeed, for a sinner, a sinner should be in fear. But when it comes to learning Torah, a person should be in fear. But when it comes to other things, a person should not have fear. So what exactly does that mean? What's this with the sinner and learning Torah and other things? So the Maharal of Prague explains that fear is really concern about loss. Fear is really a sense that something bad is happening or is about to happen. And sometimes that's justified. So for a sinner, for example, he says, a sinner should be worried that things are going to be terrible and things are going to get lost, because he, so to speak, owes Hashem a great debt. Whereas for a person who is in a good spiritual state, and it doesn't seem that they have anything clear and obvious to worry about, then for them, their constant expression of fear would actually be something very negative. So in this context, says the Maharal, when things were looking so bad for the Jewish people, when the situation, the spiritual situation of the Jewish people was bad, when the political situation was bad, this was an appropriate time to have this kind of fear, and therefore, in that case, a person should have been afraid. Who is it that should have been afraid? That we're coming to see really much later, but for now we have a very famous story leading up to that. Kamtza u'bar Kamtza charuv Yerushalayim. Because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Yerushalayim was destroyed. Atarnagola v'tarnagolta charuv Tur Malka. Because of a chicken and a rooster, Tur Malka was destroyed. Asaka derispak charuv Beitar. Because of the axle of a wagon, a shaft from a chariot, Beitar was destroyed. So we're going to have three stories about these three great centers of Jewish life in Israel: Yerushalayim, Tur Malka, and Beitar. The Maharal of Prague points out that Beitar in the south was the fortress. That was the mighty right hand of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel. Tur Malka in the north was the population center. That was really where lots and lots of people lived. And then Yerushalayim in the center was the heart. And we'll see how that is important and how that plays in a little bit later as well. The Gemora continues. Kamtza u'bar Kamtza chariv Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was destroyed because of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. Dahu Gavra, there was a person. Derachame Kamsa, this person we never know his name. People call him different things. The Gemora just calls him Hu Gavra, a certain man. I'll call him Mr. X just for our own clarity. So there was this Mr. X. Derachame Kamsa, his friend was Kamsa. Ubal Devave Bar Kamsa, and his enemy was Bar Kamsa. Avad Sudata, and he made a meal. He had a party celebrating something, whatever it was. Amalei Leshame, he said to his servant, Zil Aitili Kamsa, go and bring me Kamsa. Azil Aitile Bar Kamsa, but by mistake the servant brought Bar Kamsa. So the servant arrived at Bar Kamsa's door, knocked on the door. He says, here I've got the invitation from Mr. X. And Bar Kamsa, for whatever reason, decided to accept this invitation and attend the party. And off he goes. Gemora continues. Ata eshkachei. He came and he found Dahaveyativ. He came and he found Mr. X came and he found Bar Kamsa was sitting there. Amale, he said to him, Michte, since Ahu Gavra, you, Baldabave Dahu Gavra, who are the enemy of me, since you come to my enemy, my baitacha, what are you doing here? Come, get up, go out, leave. So he's telling him, you're not invited. Bar Kamsa obviously realizes this was an invitation by mistake, and the host is horrified that his enemy is sitting there eating his food, so get out of here. Amale, Bar Kamsa replied, Ho'il va'atai, since I have come, Shavkan, leave me, let me stay here, and I will give you the value of what I have eaten and drunk. In other words, let me pay for my own way, but please don't throw me out. Amalei, this man replied to Bar Kamsa, Lo, no, I want you out, I'm not interested in you paying for your meal. Amalei, Bar Kamsa said to Mr. X, I will give you the money for half of your meal. Amalei lo, no. Amalei I'll pay you for the entire meal. Amalei lo, he said no. Nakte biadei ve'ukme ve'afkei. The man took Bar Kamsa in his hand and threw him out. Right, really an embarrassing, humiliating story that Bar Kamsa, who'd arrived there by mistake, now wanted to salvage his reputation, but the host, Mr. X, refused to allow him to do so, and really unceremoniously threw him out of the meal. Amar, Bar Kamsa reflects on this and says, Ho'il v'haviyatvi rabanan v'lo machu. Since there were rabbis sitting there and they did not object, Shmamina, I see from here, Kanichalu, that they enjoyed it. They were fine with the fact that here you have a host publicly humiliating somebody, and the rabbis did nothing about it. Azel, I will go. Eichel behu kurza. This is an Aramaic expression. Literally, it means I will eat a wink. I will have a meal of winks. And one of the commentaries, I think it's the Maharsha, says that what would happen was they had this minhag, this practice in Yerushalayim, that you would have a Lashon Hara meal, right? You would go out with your friend for coffee, and the whole point was to give words of Lashon Hara, to give hints and allusions, and say not nice things about a certain person, and that kind of meal would be replete with winks. So that was I will go and eat winks. That was a euphemism for saying I will go and inform, go and speak Lashon Hara against the king. Azal Amar Leila Kaisar, and he's going to go and say about the king. But let's first just look at what got him so upset. It seems he's primarily not so upset with Mr. X. Mr. X maybe didn't expect better from him. I mean, obviously he's upset with Mr. X, but his real thing now is the fact that the rabbis didn't object. The rabbis were sitting at this function, and they saw the host behave this way towards the person, and they don't say anything. And when I heard this, so I thought to myself, well, that's a fairly scary prospect, because what is it that I would do, that I should do in such a situation? When you're dealing with somebody's simcha, you can see that there's this kind of altercation going on. Maybe you don't know all of the background. Is this really the correct thing to do, to now stand up, take charge of the situation, and throw out this person? and start rebuking the host for what he's doing? I'm not sure. However, I thought about it a little more, and I did ask Mrs. Goldfein, late Rabbi Goldfein's Rebbitzin. I said to her, what does she think Rabbi Goldfein would have done? Because would he really have, rebuked this guy publicly? And she said, well, he could have walked out. He probably would have walked out. I think that's the answer, perhaps, for these rabbis. The fact that they were willing to stand there, they didn't, again, to get up and make a fuss or whatever, that's not for everyone. But you see something that's wrong being done, you get up and walk out, that's for everyone. So that really was what Bar Kamsa. So I think we need to say that the rabbis were severely at fault over here. It wasn't just Mr. X who behaved disgracefully, but these rabbis who should have gotten up and walked out and who didn't. And it's because of that Bar Kamsa now had become so upset about the situation, and he decides to take it out not only on Mr. X, but in fact his attitude now is to attack the whole Jewish people. So what happens next? He goes to Caesar. Azal Amar Leila Caesar. He goes and he says to Caesar, Marudu Bach Yehudai, the Jews are rebelling against you. Amar Leila Miyamar, he said, who says? Amar Leila Shadar Lahu Kurbana Chazitin Karvan. Bring a korban, an offering to the temple. Send an offering to the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, and see if the Jewish people are willing to offer this sacrifice or not. If they're not willing to offer it, then that is a demonstration that they are indeed rebelling against you, that they want to escape your authority. And if they offer it, then you'll see that I was wrong. So how's Bar Kamsa going to make sure that they don't offer it? Azal Shado Biyade Eglatalta, the emperor sent him with a 3-year-old calf, in other words, a very nice offering that he was going to bring. Bahari Dekaate, however, whilst Bar Kamsa was going, Shadabe Muma, he placed a blemish in this animal, Beniv Sfatayim, in the lip. The Amrila, upper lip, the Amrila, and some say the Duki Nesheba Ayin, on the eyelid. Durch they placed the lididan havamuma. For us, this is a blemish. Ulididhu lav mumahu. However, for them, in other words, for the nations of the world, this would not have been a blemish. The idea is that he sabotages the offering. This is saying that the Jewish people are not going to be able to bring so easily. We'll see more about it in a second. On a simple level, Jewish people are not going to be able to bring this offering. Bar Kamsa comes forward with it. And the problem is that he's now placed this blemish in this offering. Now the Maharsha says as well, the fact that he blemished this offering, he did it in 2 places, the lip and the eye. This also, the fact that either that he did it or that the Gemora is mentioning it, is teaching us as well what it was that was wrong in this time, in this generation. They were blemished in their lip, in the words that they said to one another. They were blemished in their eye, the way that they looked at one another. There's what's called an ayin tova and an ayin ra'a. Ayin tova, a good eye, that is to look at something good that happens to another person and to rejoice with them, to be glad that something is good. A bad eye is full of jealousy and upset. So they had lashon hara, they had this bad mouth that was saying bad things, and they had this ayin hara, this bad eye that was seeing evil. That's what's hinted to in this blemish that he made. Now he blemishes this animal in a way that for Caesar and for the Romans, they wouldn't have been so shocked. So the animal's got a bit of a cut in its lip. When it comes to the temple, all animals must be of the highest level of perfection, and therefore this animal would have been disqualified for temple service. So the question now is, what are we supposed to do with it? What are the Jewish people supposed to do? You have the Sanhedrin sitting, now try to work out what to do. So the Gemora says as follows: Savar Rabbanan Nikuvei. The rabbis proposed to bring the animal, to sacrifice the animal. Why? Mishum Shlom Malchut, for peace with the government. What we said was like this: it's true that this is not the ideal situation to offer such an offering. However, in order to create peace with the government, and certainly we're going to see in just a little while how very serious this issue is, to create peace with the government. That in order to avoid this kind of machloket that we're going to see about, we should offer the offering notwithstanding. So he says, Amalei Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos replied to that, Yomru Balei Mumin craving. People would say that they will offer ba'alemun. People will say that it's okay to bring blemished animals. Now this Rebbe Zechariah ben Avkulos, the Gemora is not entirely clear to us on what his position was, but it seems he was a leader, if not the leader, within the Sanhedrin. Certainly he had an important voice, and once he had given his opinion on a matter, that was taken very, very seriously. So even though there was this proposal that we should make a hora'at sha'ah, we should go beyond the letter of the law, make an emergency ruling, there is such a concept, we should make an emergency ruling in order to permit this korban being brought. Nonetheless, Rebbe Zechariah ben Avkulos opposed that, and because of his opposition, such a measure was not instituted. He said that people will think that animals can be brought. We worried about, the next person, somebody's going to bring an animal, they're going to say, well, if you brought Caesar's offering with the blemished eye, why won't you bring mine? Fine. So that suggestion was not enacted. The rabbis came up with a second suggestion. Savur lemiktale, drastic measures to kill Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa here has the law of a rodef, of a pursuer, as a persecutor, and in such cases, he is presenting a clear threat to the Jewish people. After all, he's inspiring Roman governmental action against the Jewish people, which is going to result in great loss of life. In such a case, you can actually assassinate him, and that was the proposal. The law lays of the so that he would not go back and tell. Amalu Rebbe Zechariah replied, Yomru mathal b'kodeshin yehareg. People will say that somebody who places a blemish in a korban should be killed. And that also isn't true. That will give people the wrong idea. Next thing somebody's going to say, well, I for whatever reason, blemished offering or brought a blemished offering, they will get completely out of perspective what a serious sin that it is, and they'll end up in trouble. So therefore, what happens? They did nothing. And this, now, the review on this, Rabbi Yochanan, who led us with this introduction by speaking about a person should be afraid and not harden his heart, summarizes this incident. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Anavtanuta Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos. Due to the humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos, Hechariva et beitenu, that destroyed our temple, Sarfa et heichaleinu, burnt our home, Vehiglitanu me'artzenu, and exiled us from our land. So it's really this very tragic event that because of Rabbi Zechariah always worried about what's going to happen, we end up that they didn't offer the offering. Bar Kamsa came back to the Caesar with the report, with the true report that the Jewish people did not offer the offering, and as a result, Caesar is going to send his troops into the land of Israel and destroy the entire Commonwealth. Wipe out all Jewish inhabitation there and really destroy what we had. So that Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulos gets the blame for that because he's always looking for the way in which we should be concerned for something else that's going to happen, and really he should be a little more concerned about the immediacy of the situation, not what could be years from now if people will think that XYZ, that's the connection to the beginning. Now, the Maharal of Prague asked a very incisive question. He says, seemingly, there was a third option. Seemingly, the Sanhedrin, the rabbis, could have sent back an honest report to Caesar, saying, Caesar, thank you so much for sending the offering. We would love to offer it. We consider it an honor that you're willing, that you're recognizing Hashem as the great God and you want to bring a korban to him. However, there's a problem. This foolish person, Bar Kamsa, wicked person, has blemished the offering. And as you know, our laws prohibit blemished offerings. Therefore, if you would like to send a new offering that is unblemished, we would be delighted to offer it. But I hope you understand why we can't offer this one. I mean, that's really fairly straightforward. That's not out of line, I think, for the Jewish people to send such a message back to Caesar. But the Maharal says that, in fact, even this claim was very much a part of what Bar Kamsa had anticipated and what he was trying to say. You see, up until this point, the Roman authorities, even though that they had control over the land of Israel, really Judea, as it was known, was a province essentially of the Roman Empire. So even though they had control over that land, they had never sought to destroy the temple because they'd never seen it as a threat. So why should they destroy the temple? I mean, it's let the Jewish people pray however they would like to pray. Bar Kamsa's point was that there is something about, exceptionalism. The temple itself is an act of rebellion. It's not just the Jewish people are rebelling against you and therefore they don't want to offer your korban. It's that what's good enough for you and what's good enough for your God is not good enough for the Jewish people. The Jewish people are trying to institute something else, or trying to take themselves out of the regular scheme of things. They're trying to operate by their own rules. They're not willing to play the game. And therefore, he says, you'll see, he briefed Caesar on what he's going to do. You'll see, I'll send this blemished offering, which is good enough for you, Caesar, and they're going to make a thing like it's not good enough for them. That says the Maharal was part of Bar Kamsa's wicked plan, and unfortunately this plan, which was successful, although I'll point out again that this plan was only successful because of the sinat chinam, the baseless hatred that existed within that society, of the host wanting to throw Bar Kamsa out, of the rabbis not willing to say something, of Rebbe Zechariah ben Avkulos not willing to take decisive action, and so forth. Another explanation that I've heard about the humility of Rebbe Zechariah ben Avkulos, and why he's criticized for that humility, is that we have a general rule when it comes to the Sanhedrin, when it comes to matters of life and death. The greater you are, the later you speak. The idea is that first the junior members speak, and then the more senior, then the more senior, then the more senior, and then every person's giving their own opinion without being influenced by what was said before. Because when I hear what was said by somebody who's not as great as me, it doesn't really shock or horrify. It doesn't really cause me to reevaluate my opinion, because they're not as great as me, so if they disagree, that's fine. But when I hear that everyone greater than me has said a different opinion, I'm no longer willing to give my own opinion. And some have proposed that Rebbe Zechariah ben Avkulos, even though he was the greatest of all the members of the Sanhedrin, he really held to a minority opinion. But he was such a humble person that he wanted to put himself first. He said, I'm the least, the most junior of all of you, and therefore I'll speak first. But this really had the exact impact that the system of greatest last was designed to avoid, because after Rebbe Zechariah ben Avkulos had expressed his opinion, no one was willing to disagree with him. That's another explanation of his excessive humility. Now the Gemora goes on. We'll speak later on with what we started this Gemora. Remember, there were three stories, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, which we've just learned. Also the chicken and the rooster of Tur Malka, and the shaft of the chariot of Beitar. We're going to come to those stories in a minute, but now we spend some time on the actual story of the destruction of the temple. So, what happens next is, Shadar Alayhu, the Roman authorities, sent Neron Caesar, Caesar Nero, against the Jewish people to destroy Yerushalayim. Kika'ati, when he arrived, Shada Gira Mizrach, he shot an arrow pointing in the direction of the east, Ata Nafal Yerushalayim, and the arrow fell in Yerushalayim. So it seems he was doing this as some kind of auguring, as some kind of way of determining, telling the future, getting a sense of what's destined. So the arrow falls in Yerushalayim. In other words, you are destined to destroy Yerushalayim. Lamarav, he then shot an arrow to the west. The wind blew the arrow, whatever it was, the arrow also fell in Yerushalayim. La'arba ruchot hashamayim, to all four directions, ata nafal Yerushalayim, and in all cases this arrow fell in the city of Yerushalayim. Amalei liyinoka, so he said to a child, and this was also something we find many times in the Gemora, that you find a school child who is learning Chumash or Tanakh, and you say, tell me a verse, and the verse that they say somehow is connected to what's going on in your life. So that's what Nero Caesar says to a child. He pulls him out of school. He says, Psuki Psukai, tell me a pasuk. Amalei, he said to him a verse from the book of Yechezkel. V'natati et nigmati be'edom, I will take vengeance against Edom, b'yad ami Yisrael, through the hand of my nation Israel. In other words, you have one wicked nation, Edom, and they have sinned, or will sin against the Jewish people, and Hashem will then bring the Jewish people to take retribution against Edom. That's what this child is saying. Now, Edom, our sages associate with Rome, and so here you have Nero Caesar, the bringing this army from Rome, coming to do something against the Jewish people that one day the Romans will pay for. In other words, they're coming to do something wicked. So he gets a sense that he's really like the bait in the trap here, that he's really going to be held accountable for everything that he does. So what does he say? Amar, Kol shebrichu ba'il chruva beitei. The Holy One, blessed is He, is coming to destroy His house. Uvai lichpure yadei, and He is coming to wash His hands. Be'ahu gavra, with this person, with me. Hashem wants me to do His dirty work. Arak azal v'igayer. He went, he left, and he converted. In other words, he became a Jew. He historically, no one knows what happened to Nero, but the Gemora says that he left and became a Jew, and consequently, nafak minei Rebbe Meir. And Rebbe Meir eventually was descended from him. So Rebbe Meir, one of the greatest of all of the Tanaim, of all the halachic authorities of the Gemora. So that Rebbe Meir was descended from this Nero Caesar, and perhaps it was even as a some kind of reward or some kind of recognition of the fact that he was willing to not destroy the Jewish people, even though we'll see later on that there was quite a lot going for those who were willing to destroy the temple. So since the Jewish people, since Nero Caesar didn't want to do that, so he's rewarded, he becomes Jewish, he's rewarded with this great descendant of Rebbe Meir. So Nero's out. Who then is in? Shadra Alau Aspasianus Caesar. So they then send Aspasianus Caesar, that is Vespasian Caesar. So they send the next General Vespasian, one of their great generals, at Tsara Tzlachshani. He came in late siege to Jerusalem for 3 years. Now, historically, this was either the second most or the most difficult military campaign that the Romans ever fought. This insurrection in Jerusalem, which continued a generation later with Bar Kokhba. But this great revolt, they sent in legion after legion after legion. It was a really significant world event. And the fact that you can see one of their top generals is there, laying siege for 3 years. The city of Jerusalem was so well fortified that it was very, very difficult for the Romans, with all of their military prowess, to conquer it. There were 3 wealthy people in the city of Jerusalem. They were Nakdimon ben Gurion, ben Kalba Savua, ben Tzitzit HaKeset. Okay, those are their names, and they were all like titles or nicknames that they'll explain. What were these 3 wealthy people? How did they get their names? Nakdimon ben Gurion, Nakdimon the son of Gurion, Nikta, the Shon, the son Shon, Nikta Lochama Ba'avuro, the son Shon because of him. The Gemora in Tanit tells the story of how he borrowed money in order to pay back, in order to finance water distribution for the city of Yerushalayim, or for the Jewish people, and he borrowed money from a wealthy Roman nobleman and promised that he would replace the water by a certain amount of time. The time came and it hadn't rained. He was really going to lose a huge amount of money. He asked Hashem to please help him. Hashem brought the clouds, rain clouds, and the rain poured with water. The dams were filled again, and he was able to return the water that he had loaned from this Roman nobleman. However, the Roman nobleman said, you've missed the deadline, because look, it's so dark outside, it's already night, whereas really still afternoon. But how are you going to prove it if you don't have a watch? So Nakdimon prayed again to Hashem, and the clouds opened. The ray of light shone down. You could see it was still day. So that was such a great thing that happened for him. So he was known as Nakdimon, right, the shiner. The second one was Ben Kalba Savua. This, incidentally, was the father-in-law of Rebbe Akiva. Now, Ben Kalba Savua literally means the son of the satiated dog. Now, it's a strange name, right? A satiated dog. Why? Whoever would enter his house hungry like a dog, would leave the house feeling satisfied. So he was known really for his chesed, for his kindness and doing good to others. Ben tzitzit HaKeset, the tzitzit on the tzitzit on the pillow, right? Tzitzit, Mr. Tzitzit pillow. Shehayta tzitzato nigrarot al gabek satot. Because his tzitziot were dragging on pillows. In other words, you talk about the red carpet treatment. Wherever he went, he had pillows that his tzitzit would sit on. He was again somebody who lived this kind of incredibly wealthy lifestyle. Igadamri, she'ata kisato mutelet ben gdoleromi, and some say the reason he was called Ben Tzitzit HaKeset is because his tzitziot, his kisei, his pillow, his seat, was placed amongst the great people of the city of Rome. So in other words, he had this great prestigious position. Okay. Chadama, one of these these 3 wealthy people in Rome. Chadamar, one of these wealthy people said, Ana zainalu b'chiti v'siri. I will provide the people of Yerushalayim with wheat and with barley. So I'll give them all of the basic food sustenance for as long as this siege will continue. V'chadamar lehu b'rechamra uvra milcha. One say I'll provide them uvamishcha, with wine, salt, and oil. So what you could say is perhaps the secondary needs of foodstuffs. V'chadamar lehu b'tzivi. And one of them said, I will provide you with wood. V'shabchu rabbanan leb'tzivi. And our rabbis praised the one who provided the wood. Because really wood is something that was expensive, important. Rav Chisda would give his servant all of his keys. He would not give him the keys for wood. For one measure storehouse of wheat, you need 60 storehouses of wood. So you see that wood is very important. Now, if they're each providing these necessities for the land, how much could they survive for? They had enough to provide for 21 years. So this is really a substantial proposal that they're going to take care of the Jewish people of Yerushalayim. Now, at this point, the Maharal of Prague says, we see these three wealthy people. This also is a model for the three reasons why Hashem would give people wealth. So let's expand. Let's spend a minute on that. Why is it that Hashem would give people wealth? The Maharal says, so one person is given wealth in order that he can provide for others. Another person is given wealth in order that he can receive great honor. And a third person is given wealth because he's the kind of person that everything he touches turns to gold. Think about Joseph, Why was Joseph given wealth? It wasn't that Joseph was given wealth, I suppose you could say, to sustain. But we see within Joseph, he was this kind of person that he was just successful in everything. So, coming back to these three people, can we work out who was given wealth for which of these reasons? One of them is given wealth in order to support people. That was Ben Kalba Savua, the one who would always give. One was given wealth in order that he should be an important person. That was Ben Tzitzit HaKeset, the one who tzitzit were on pillows, or his pillow was an important place. And one was given wealth because everything he touched turned to gold. That was Nakdimon Ben Gurion. And the Maharal says, can you then work out which of them gave which of these gifts to the city of Yerushalayim? Which of them gave grain and the basic foodstuffs? That was Kalba Savua. That was the one who is all about providing for people, giving them what they need. Who gave the oil, salt, and wine, things which give dignity to life? That was Ben Tzitzit HaKeset. He was the one who was all about dignity. And then finally, who was it who gave this magnificent gift of wood, right? This almost excessive wealth. That's Akdimon Ben Gurion, who's just blessed by Hashem with his wealth. Now, they have enough for 21 years, so even though the entire might of the Roman army is encamped outside the walls, as we saw, for 3 years they're not able to get in. Well, it sounds like things are under control, and they're not going to be able to get in this situation either. So, however, things unfortunately take a turn. Havabu Hani Baryoni. There were these zealots amongst them. Amru Lahu Rabbanan. Neifak Vanavid Shlama Badayu. The rabbi said, let us go and make peace with the Romans. Let's surrender. Let's work it out. As I said before, the Jewish people were citizens of the Roman Empire anyway. So let's work out how to call off this war and put down the rebellion. Lo shavkinhu. The zealots would not allow them to make peace. Amilu nevik v'navik karva b'dayu. On contrast, the zealots said, let us go out and engage in battle against them. Amru Rabbanan, the rabbi said, Lo mistayim milta, it won't help. You'll not be able to overcome the Romans. Kamu kalnu lahani amavi dechiti v'sa'ari v'avikafna. So the zealots then set fire to the storehouses of wheat and barley, and there was a famine. After all, it's good to have the grain, wine, the oil. Certainly the wood is a good thing. But if you don't have the basic grains, then you actually have nothing. So now that there's a famine in Yerushalayim, the Gemora is going to spend some time speaking about the famine, the consequences and what that meant. So it speaks about this woman, Marta bat Baitus, Atirta de Yerushalayim Hava. She was the wealthy woman of Yerushalayim. Shadarta l'shlucha, she sent out her servant. Va'amrele zil aitili smida, go and bring me fine flour. Ada azil is dabain. But whilst he was at the shop, whilst he was on his way to the shops, it was already sold out. Ata amrele smida leka chivarta ika. She says there's no fire. He comes back and he says to her, ma'am, I know you always have your fine flour. There's no more fine flour. There is regular white flour. Amrele zil aitili, she said, go get it. Ada azil is davan. While he's going back to get the white flour gets sold out. There's no white flour, but there is ordinary flour. Go get me the ordinary flour. He went, it was sold out. He says there's no regular flour, but there is barley flour. And she said, go get that for me. By the time he went, that was also sold out. So certainly you see here a servant lacking in initiative. I would have expected that after the second or third time he would have gotten whatever was there. But the point is that he never expected it. Every time he genuinely expected that he would come back and find that what he was looking for would still be there. And it wasn't. The Maharal says that you see in here really Hashem's hashgacha pratik, that you see Hashem's divine supervision. You see Hashem paying attention to every detail. And really the Maharal's book, the Netzach Yisrael, the eternality of the Jewish people, is almost a counterwork to his book on the Exodus from Egypt, Gvurat Hashem, the might of Hashem. Because what he shows, just as B'tzeitim in Mitzrayim, when we're coming out of the land of Egypt, Hashem orchestrates every single detail and each of the plagues fit together, and Moshe's conversations with Pharaoh, everything's just so too sadly when it comes to the Exodus, Tzeitim Yushalayim, to the Exodus from Jerusalem, for the destruction of Jerusalem, that you can see again the details are worked out, that this wasn't something that happened randomly, that it's almost as if Hashem is in here orchestrating bit by bit the destruction of all that we held dear, which is the terrible tragedy. So now Marita Bat Baitus is sitting at home and she's got no food. Have a shlifa masana. She had taken off her shoes. Amra, she says, I'll go out and find something to eat. She stepped on some dung, which stuck to her foot. Now remember, she never went outside before. She was always sending her servant. But now it's not working. She says, I'll go get something myself. And she stands on this dung, and she died. So the idea, you see, you have from really the greatest height to the lowest depths. You have this woman who is so wealthy and pampered, and everything in her life has always been the way that she wants it. She never even walked outside barefoot before, and now she's at a point where she's so full with disgust in life that she actually realizes there's a life ahead. She's not able to continue. Kari Allah Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, upon hearing this incident, applied the following verse from the curses, of the book of the Devarim of Kitavor. Harachabach ve'anuga, the tender amongst you and the soft one, asher lo nasta kaf ragla, who never had set the sole of her foot upon the ground, right, is in terrible trouble. That was her situation. Ikadamri, there's another opinion in this Gemora. Grogorot Rabbi Tzadok achla ve'it nisa v'meita. That it wasn't that she stood on dung, but that she ate the fig of Rabbi Tzadok, and then she became disgusted and died. What's the story of the fig of Rabbi Tzadok? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Tzadok yativ arbin shnim b'tainita. Rabbi Tzadok sat for 40 years fasting, the loli charev Yerushalayim, so that Yerushalayim should not be destroyed. In other words, he was an ascetic. He was a person who devoted virtually his entire life to fasting and praying for the salvation of Jerusalem, for the Jewish people to live and to exist. So obviously he was not like Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulos, kind of going blindly ahead without too much concern over what was to come. Rabbi Tzadok was somebody who sensed deeply the trouble that the Jewish people were in. He was the classic image of a holy man, and he was devoted to trying to get compassion and mercy that this shouldn't happen, as his way of through fasting. That was his contribution towards the Jewish people. So for 40 years he was fasting. When he would eat something, you could see that from outside. In other words, he was really an emaciated person. And when he was healthy, when he would eat after a fast again, so they would bring him a fig, he would suck out the juice and throw it away. In other words, his body was not really used to accepting solids. He could basically just live on this kind of fig juice, and that was what he ate. He threw that away, and it was that Marta bat Baintus may have eaten that caused her death. When Marta bat Baintus was dying, she took out all of her gold and silver, and she threw it in the marketplace. Amra, she said, Hi, Lamaimi Baili. What do I need this for? This is what the pasuk says, Kaspam b'chutzot yashlichu. They throw their money out in the streets. That the idea is that you reach a point where money becomes useless. You have a point in the destruction where you need the money. That's the wealthy people offering to provide for Yerushalayim. But then you reach the next point where even money is not able to save, is not able to help. Sadly, for example, we could compare this to many of the stories of the Holocaust, where somebody first is able with money to buy themselves out of trouble, and then later it reaches a point where no amount of money actually helps. Now the Gemora continues. Abba Sikra Reisha Bar Yonah Yerushalayim. That this man Abba Sikra was the head of the zealots of Yerushalayim. Bar Achted Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Hava. And he also happened to be the nephew of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the great sage of the generation, mentioned in Pirkei Avot as well as many other places, a student of Hillel. Shalach le. The Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sent a message to Abba Sikra. Ta betzina legabai. Come meet me secretly. He wanted to set up a private meeting. This Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and remember, the rabbis were against the war against the Romans, and the zealots were pushing for it. But now the situation is really getting hopeless. So Rabbi Yochanan calls for a secret meeting with Abba Sikra. He said to him, how long will you do this? And destroy the world, in other words, kill our whole community with the famine. Abba Sikra says, what can I do? In other words, you're right. But I'm worried that if I say something to them, they will kill me. I'm not dealing with reasonable people over here, right? That unless I take a stand of war, military stance, they're going to kill me. He said, Rabbi Yochanan said, come up with a way that I will be able to leave the city, and perhaps I will effect some kind of salvation. So what he does, so he says, pretend that you are sick. And everyone will come and hear that the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is sick and is in trouble. And bring something noxious. Agni gabach, and put that near you. And people will say that you died. We'll make a story, so we'll fake an illness and then we'll fake your death. And your own students should carry you. Nobody else should take you out, because nobody else should have the responsibility of carrying you, because they will feel the kalil at the inuyali dechai kalil mimaita, because such a person would notice that you are light, that a living person is lighter, is easier to carry than a deceased person. So get your own students to carry you out. Avid hachi, and this is what he did. Nichnas bo Rabbi Eliezer mitzad echad, Rabbi Yeshua mitzad acher. So two of the greatest students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, carried his bier, carried his coffin, in which he was pretending to be dead. When they came to the exit of the city, the guards, not the guards on the outside, right, or maybe they would say the double purpose, but these were the guards on the inside, preventing Jews leaving the city. We saw the zealots are forcing everyone to fight, so they're not allowing anyone to leave. So those guards, they're bringing out this body for burial. The guards say, we want to first stab him with a spear to make sure that he's really dead. Amalu, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yeshua said, Yomru, Rabban Dakru. They would say that the Romans will say that, the Koren learns this was what Abba Sikra said to them, not the students. Abba Sikra said, don't do it, because they know this is a celebrity. There's a great person amongst the Jewish people, and if we let this happen, then the Romans will believe that who were willing to do terrible things, to even stab, the greatest Jews. They said, fine, let's at least push him. Right? I'll say, look how they treat their great leaders with such disrespect. So Abba Sikra managed to talk their way through the pass. They opened the gates and he went out. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai now manages to smuggle himself out of the city, and he arrives and he gets there. Amar, Shalma alach Malka, Shalma alach Malka. He reaches the tent of Vespasian, the army general, and he says, peace to you, king, peace to you, king. Amalei, Vespasian says to him, Mechayavat trei katala. You are guilty of death on 2 points. Firstly, I'm not a king. And you are calling me a king. And that's guilty of death to refer to somebody other than the Caesar as king. Furthermore, and secondly, if I am indeed king as you claim, then why is it that you didn't come to me before now? Rabbi Yochanan replies, this that you said that you're not a king, Ibra Malka'at, in truth you are a king. Tilav Malka'at lo mimsur Yerushalayim bi'adech. Were you not a king, Yerushalayim would never have been handed over to you. Dichtiv v'halvanon be'adir yipol. The Levanon is a reference to Yerushalayim, will fall at the hands of the mighty. Ve'ain adir el melech. When you talk about a mighty is the king. Dichtiv, as the verse says, Vaya adiro mimenu. The mighty one was from him. The ruler comes from them, so that we see the mighty one, the ruler, that's the king. Ve'in Levanon el Beit HaMikdash. The Levanon is the Beit HaMikdash. Shenemar hahar hatov hazeh v'halvanon. Moshe asked Hashem, please can I go and see this good mountain and the Levanon? Why is the Beit HaMikdash called the Levanon? Rashi says from the word lavan, white. That's because that was where the sins of the Jewish people would become white, where their slates would become clean. So the Gemora then continues, Verdekamart, and this that you said, Imalka ana mailokaitit, if I am a king, then why didn't you come before now? Legabai to visit me. Adhaidna biryoni deit ban lo shaviknan. Until now, the zealots amongst us would not allow us to make the escape. It was only now that the situation was desperate that I was able to get out. So, to answer again Vespasian's 2 questions, how can you call me a king? I'm not the king. And number 2, if I am the king, why would you come to greet me before now? So to that, Rabbi Yochanan answers, number 1, you must be the king because you are responsible basically for destroying the Beit HaMikdash, and Hashem would only give that power to a king. And number 2, I never came before because of the zealots guarding who was not let us out. Okay. Amalei, ilu chavit shel dvash v'dargun karachala. Vespasian replies to him, if you had a barrel of honey and there was a serpent coiled around it, wouldn't you have smashed the barrel to kill the snake? In other words, the only way to save the situation was to come and see me. You worried about the zealots? Burn the whole place to the ground and come out to see me as soon as you can. That was Vespasian's claim. Smash the barrel of honey, which is Jerusalem, in order to get rid of the snake. Ishtak. Rabbi Yochanan had nothing to say. He didn't reply. Kariela Rav Yosef, Itamar Rabbi Akiva. Either Rav Yosef or Rabbi Akiva responded with the following verse, that they said, Meishiv chachamim achor v'datam yisachel. Hashem brings the wise backwards and makes their understanding foolish. Ibai leila meimar le shaklinan savta v'shaklinan leila darikon. Rabbi Yochanan should have said, you bring tongs and you remove the snake. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan really conceded that he said, you're right, Vespasian, we should have destroyed Jerusalem in order to make things better. But instead, Rabbi Yochanan conceded when he could have said, no, there was a much better way. You wait until the time is right. You take off the snake with tongs, and you've saved the barrel. In other words, v'kadlinan kill the snake, v'chavita shekinan and you can leave the barrel. So we should be able to salvage the situation. Okay. Adahaki ata pirsakta ale miromi. In the meantime, a messenger arrived from Rome. Amale kum demetla Caesar. The messenger says to Vespasian, "Get up, Caesar has died, v'amrani chashiv de Romi," and the important ones in Rome, presumably the Senate, le'otivach bereisha, are planning to appoint you as the leader. So he got this news that exactly as Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai had said, that he would be the king, that indeed he was going to be the next Caesar. He had put on one of his shoes, and he was trying to put on his other shoe, lo ayil, and his second shoe wouldn't come on. Suddenly his shoe wasn't fitting him. He wanted to take off his other shoe, lo nafak, and the shoe wouldn't come off. So now he's stuck, right? One shoe off because his foot feels too swollen to get the shoe off. One shoe on because the foot feels too swollen to get the shoe on. My eye, he said, what's going on? Amalei, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, Lo titzta'er, do not be in pain. Shmua tova akelach. You have heard good news. Dichtiv, the verse in the book of Mishlei says, Shmua tova tedashein etzem. Good news fattens the bone. Elamai tekante. So what should I do? Asked Vespasian. Later inish de law meitzva daitach mine velachloch kamech. Bring a person who drives you crazy, who you really can't stand, and let him walk in front of you. Dichtiv, as the verse says, V'ruach nechaati yavesh garam. A broken spirit dries up the bones, right? So just as good news fattens the bones, bad news or frustration contracts the bones. So your foot is expanded because of this good news. So they're saying that it will shrink because of the bad news. Avid Haki, he did this. Ayil, and then he could put on his shoes. So he brought one of the nudniks, and then he was able to put on his shoe again. And he says to him, listen, since you are so clever, why didn't you come before now, Rabbi Yochanan? Legabai. Didn't I already tell you that they wouldn't let me? He said, I also told you that is not a good excuse. So that's kind of a stalemate, on that point. He says, I am going back to Rome, and they will send another person. Tell me what I should give you. I'm willing to grant a request. Either he's impressed by the greatness of the man, or he's having compassion on the situation, or he's grateful that he was the first one to give him the news that he was going to become the king. So he says, tell me what you would like and I'll give it to you. Amalei, he says to him, Tain li yavne v'chachameha. Give me, he's asking for three things. Yavne and its sages, v'shoshilta the Rabban Gamliel, and the chain of descent of Rabban Gamliel. They were the political leaders of the Jewish people, and the Roman modus operandi very often was to kill the leaders of the territories that they conquered. And so he was saying that I want to please spare Rabban Gamliel, the leadership of the Jewish people. After all, they're the ancestors of Mashiach. And then number three, V'asvata the Messiah Rabbi Tzadok, and a doctor who will heal Rabbi Tzadok. Kariele Rav Yosef, Vitam Rabbi Akiva. Rav Yosef, or perhaps Rabbi Akiva, then said the verse, once again, Hashem has led the wise astray and given them foolish understanding, because he's asking for three things here, right? Chiyavne and its sages, Rabban Gamliel and his descendants, and Dr. to heal Rabbi Tzadok. Really, he should have asked for something else. Leave us alone, leave the Jews alone. In other words, go back, call off the war. So why didn't Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai ask? I mean, it sounds like a pretty obvious thing. If he says, ask me anything, he'd say, go home. V'hu savar, Rabbi Yochanan thought, Dilma kulehai lo avid v'tzalapurta nami lo havai. He said, maybe they won't grant that request, and then we won't even have a minimal salvation. So that's why he says that he thought it was the right thing to ask for those three things. Now, the Ma'arla Prague points out, so we talk about Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim, right? We talk about the world stands on three things: on Torah, on service of Hashem, and on deeds of kindness. So Torah is the sages of Yavne, the avodah, service of God, is a Rebbe Tzadok with his holy way of fasting in front of Hashem, and the Gmilot Chasadim, I think, is the family of Hillel. Hillel, the great person of kindness, although I'm not 100% sure about that. I have to check up on it. But this was the salvation that he made, and that request was granted. The Gemora now wants to know, what was it that happened with Rebbe Tzadok? Asvata de Messiah Rebbe Tzadok Maihi. How did the doctors heal Rebbe Tzadok? Yomakama Ashkiye Mai Depari. First day they gave him water with bran in it. Lamachar Mai Disipuka. Next one, it was water with flour. Lamachar Mai Dekimcha. The next one, there was water with even a little more flour. Ad Ravach Mai Purta Purta, until his stomach began to broaden little by little. In other words, you start with very basic and easy to absorb foods, and then you go into more complex foods. Azal Shadul Titus, they sent Titus. The Amar, and Titus said, this kind of characterizes Titus and his attitude, the great arrogant leader. Ey Eloheimu, where is their God? Tzur Chatzuvo, their rock in whom they took refuge. Zeh Titus Harasha, Shechirev Begidef Klape Mala. This is the wicked Titus who blasphemed and insulted Hashem. Titus, arrogantly almost takes on Hashem, so to speak, in this fight. So let's learn a little bit more about Titus, and this is the section actually discussing the destruction of the temple itself. Mayasa, what did Titus do? Tafas zona biyado, he took a prostitute in his hand. V'nichnas lebeit kodesh HaKodashim, he entered into the Holy of Holies. V'etzia sefer Torah, he spread out a Torah on the ground. Ve'avar aleha aveira, and on it he committed a sin. V'natal siaf, he then took a sword. V'gider et haparochet, and he stabbed the curtain separating the holy from the Holy of Holies. V'na'asa neis ve'adam mevatz ve'etz ve'yotzei, a miracle occurred and blood poured forth. Uksavor harag et atzmo, and he thought that he had killed himself. That's a metaphor or a euphemism. He thought that he had murdered Hashem. He stabs the curtain, blood starts pouring out in the Holy of Holies as he's destroying the temple. So he says, that's it, I've killed Hashem. Tosfot asks, why would Hashem do such a miracle, especially when it gives a false impression? And Tosfot says that's to show that it was, so to speak, painful for Hashem to engage in the destruction, to be a part of, to be witness to, and to be a part of the destruction of his holy home. As the sages, as the verse says in the book of Tehillim, Shagu tzorim bekerev ma'adecha, the enemies roared in the midst of your meeting place. Samu otatem otot, they have designated their signs as signs. The fact that they are deciding that the blood means that Hashem is dead, so it's like they're making up their own interpretations of the situation. Abba Hanan says, Mi chamocha chasin Hashem, who is strong like you, Hashem? Mi kamocha chasin v'kashe, who is like you, strong and impervious? She'ata shomen yutzov v'gdufo shel oto rasha v'shotek, that you hear the blasphemy and abuse of this wicked person and you say nothing. And here is the idea that we see the strength of Hashem not only in his might, but also in his silence. Even in the fact that Hashem sometimes allows these things to happen, that Hashem is able to hold on to the bigger picture and to see it through to the end, no matter how painful and difficult. That also is a sign of the strength of Hashem. The Rebbe Ishmael Tana, the house of Rebbe Ishmael, taught, Mi chamocha ba'ilim Hashem, who is like you amongst the mighty Hashem? Mi kamocha ba'ileinim, who amongst you, who is like you amongst the mute? So we see again this theme in Tisha B'Av of taking the triumphant and turning that into the sorrowful. That this song, which is said as we cross the sea, as we see the greatest might of Hashem, so that's really what it means. The greatest miracle of all time accomplished by Hashem. Mi kamocha ba'ilim Hashem, and we sing that joyfully every single day on Tisha B'Av. We see Hashem's strength in his silence. Mi kamocha be'ileinim Hashem, who is like you, Hashem, in your silence, in the fact that you have the strength to continue to be silent in the midst of such blasphemy. Just going to see the end of the story of Titus, and then we'll wrap it up. Ma'asa, what did Titus do? Natal taparochet v'asa kamin gargutani. He took the parochet, the curtain, he made it like a basket. V'hevi kol kelim shebemikdash ve'nichan betochan ve'nichan behen. He took all of the vessels of the Beit HaMikdash, placed them within them, besfina leilech lihishtabeach b'iro, to go and be praised in his city. We'll skip the verses for now, just for brevity. But he takes all of this, and amad alav nachshol shebeyam letovo, and a wave in the sea comes up to drown him. It seems to me that the God of these, the Jewish God, is strength only in water. Pharaoh came and was drowned in water. Sisera came and was drowned in water. He's going to drown me in water also. The Maral Prague says Hashem likes to drown the wicked in water because then they are wiped out. So that was like the flood. If Hashem's really mighty, let him come make war on me in the dry land. Again, you see the arrogance of Titus. A voice came from heaven and said, wicked man, son of a wicked man, grandson of Esav the wicked. I have a small creature in my world, V'yatosh Shema. Its name is the gnat. And the Gemora goes on to describe how this gnat was sent into Titus's brain and drove him crazy with this drilling against his brain for 7 years until eventually he died. The Gemora then continues to speak about the interaction between Onkelos, the convert who wrote the great translation of the Torah into Aramaic, interviewing various deceased wicked people to find out whether he should convert to Judaism or not. And then we also have the stories of the chicken and the rooster destroying Tur Malka, the shaft of the wagon of the chariots that destroyed Beitar. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today. Maybe if I have the strength, we'll have another session later on. But I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for joining me. And please God, we should not spend more time learning on Tisha B'Av, but that this should be the final time that we do learn, and that as we have invested effort into learning the great destruction that was wrought, so we should merit to see the rebuilding and the return to Yerushalayim, the return of Hashem's presence in the new built Beit HaMikdash. Please God, we should share good things.